Death. It's the one certainty that we all have in life. The inevitable fate that unites every person who has ever walked this earth. But what happens when we die? How have different cultures around the world honored, feared, and even celebrated the transition from life to whatever lies beyond? From the elaborate burial rites of the ancient Egyptians to the sky burials of Tibet, from the brutal spectacle of public executions to the ghostly echoes of the afterlife, humanity has always been obsessed with what happens when we take our final breath. Today, we're exploring the many ways death has approached throughout history. Some strange, some terrifying, and some downright fascinating. We'll journey through the blood-soaked history of executions, from the guillotine to the electric chair, and unravel the intriguing customs that have shaped death rituals across the globe. And of course, we'll dive into the mysteries of the afterlife. Heaven, hell, reincarnation, and the eerie tales of those who have claimed to glimpse beyond the veil. So settle in, but don't get too comfortable, because right now, we're walking the thin line between life and death, where legends are born and spirits never truly rest. Welcome to Beneath the Shadows. Yeah, so welcome. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Travis Fenn. I am your host here on Beneath the Shadows, and I appreciate you being here and checking out the episode. Whether you're a return listener or you are a new listener, I do appreciate you being here. And as I just said before, we are going to be checking out death today. Death and what comes with it. Dying, the afterlife, some histories, rituals, traditions, some execution things, the way that people have been executed throughout history. We're going to check out a whole lot of death today. And, it's fitting. It's pretty fitting for some reason. In the middle of doing research for this episode last week when I was going to get to recording and everything and really diving into it and, getting this episode pieced together, my grandfather unfortunately passed away. And, we just buried him yesterday. So it's kind of fitting in a very, macabre and strange way that this episode is what I was researching when he did pass away. So, and I know he's in as people would say, he's in a better place, and he's no longer in pain. So that's really what counts for me. But we're gonna try and get through this episode without getting choked up at all, because it's might be difficult in a couple of spots, but most of this is about, rituals throughout the world and things of that nature. And while I may make some references to my grandfather, to people who have passed in my life before, going to try not to get too choked up or too caught up on the sadness of it all. I'm going to try and, make this intriguing, make it informational, make it exciting and interesting as much as I can. And like I said, I thank you for being here, and let's get fucking heading into this deadly, death-defying fucking... Death might be around the corner, and, the Grim Reaper might be waiting for you edition of Beneath the Shadows. Death rituals vary widely across cultures, reflecting unique beliefs about the afterlife, reverence for the deceased, and cultural identity. Here's a glimpse into some fascinating, strange, and sometimes gross death rituals from around the world. So to do this, we are going to bounce from continent to continent, and we're going to kind of look at different regions within these continents or different states within these continents or, countries, and we are going to look at them and look at their cultural ways of dealing with death and dealing with people who have died, whether that is going to be, burying them or cremating them or something different all entirely. We are going to kind of tackle them and look at these different regions and understand how people have shown love, shown respect, shown appreciation for their loved ones after they've passed on and moved to wherever they may move to after they pass on. So we're going to start with Africa. In Africa, we're going to go to Ghana to start. In Ghana, the deceased are buried in elaborate, custom-designed coffins that reflect their personalities, profession, or passions. Coffins may resemble animals like fish, lions, cows, etc., cars, planes, boats, food like peppers, pineapples, corn, and more, buildings or houses, books like the Bible. I saw a Walkman that someone had done, or even things like Coca-Cola bottles or other beverages like, alcohol or something of that nature. I saw a promethazine one, a fucking promethazine and codeine fucking syrup bottle that was in there, and that's like, what? Like, why would you, what? And, I did say that, in Ghana they do this, and yes, they do, but I believe it's only like, if you can afford to have one of these made for you. I don't think everyone's just getting one made because they pass away. Maybe people are kind enough and respect the culture and the culture and the community enough that when they see someone else has had a loved one pass away, even if they can't afford to pay for one of these coffins, maybe some of these coffin makers, because it's intricate woodworking and things of that nature. Some of these people, and it's a talent that these people have, and I don't know if they're respectful enough, or they are kind enough, or if they are willing to take the financial hit to create these coffins for people who also cannot afford them or not. But this practice celebrates the person's life rather than mourning in their death. So it, celebrates what made that person who they were. It celebrates the best things about them. It celebrates what they loved as much as possible. And, bring that right to the forefront, so much so that it's what they are going to be buried in. Like, this person loved cooking, we're going to bury them in a fucking piece of food. They loved Coca-Cola, we're going to make a Coca-Cola bottle. They loved animals and fishing, they're going to go ahead and bury them in a fucking something that looks like a tuna. It varies from person to person depending on what they did, but I think it's very cool. If you look some of them up, there are some very intricate, awesome looking coffins that people have made, from traditional sense in the United States here, and you see a coffin and then you look at these, they look like kind of like joke coffins, but it's a more intricate and well-designed and respectful and elaborate coffin that really shows some personality to it, instead of just being, here's a plain piece of fucking wood that was, polished up and has some metal on it and shit. Which I get either way, and I get why classic coffins are still around and stuff, but I just, it's hard. It's hard to say which I would prefer if I had the choice of doing one or the other, but I don't even know if I'd prefer either of them in reality, and I'll touch on that a little bit at the end. I'm going to get through all this before I really touch on what my view is on some of this stuff and what I would want when I inevitably pass away at some point in my life. And so we're going to move on from Ghana. We're going to go to Madagascar. The Famadihana, Famadihana, lots of A's, lots of vowels in that one. Every other letter is a vowel, pretty much. Every other letter is a vowel. But Famadihana is known as the turning of the bones in Madagascar. This ritual involves exhuming the bodies of loved ones, rewrapping them in fresh cloths, and dancing with their remains. In this joyous occasion, it also allows the family to reconnect with the deceased and update them on family events. So you could be like, yeah, little Jimmy just graduated from high school, and, young Megan just got her first fucking job, and, little douchebag over there just got a Rolls Royce sitting on 40s or something. I don't know. But you get what I'm saying. You can update them on, what's going on in your family's lives, and what events have been happening, and what are the main takeaways, and you could really update them and keep them as much as part of the family as they were before they had passed away. And there is, in some sense, where it's like, hey, that's beautiful, you're able to do that. I don't know how I would feel. As I'm in the culture that I've grown up in the United States, and usually immediately after death, bodies are taken away. They are kind of moved out of sight. They are taken to a funeral home, to a coroner, to wherever they may be going exactly, and they are, dolled up and dressed up and done up in a way that makes them look more presentable than they were, say, right before they passed or as they passed. And you don't really have as much interaction with a dead body as a lot of these other cultures do. And I feel like there is some disconnect that us, as being, the culture of the United States, we have some disconnect with dead bodies, dead people, and their presence that still exists in some way, that a lot of these other cultures do believe in, that a lot of these other cultures embrace fully. And, they do it so much that they will dig up their old loved ones that have passed away. They will rewrap them, reclothe them, and bring them up to speed on what's happening in their families' lives. And I do get that there's graveyards in the United States. People get buried, and people do go and say, like, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to talk to this grave marker because I feel somewhere deep down that I am actually talking to my relative who has passed, who is buried here underneath this dirt, and I feel a connection with them by coming to their final resting place and being able to offer, my thoughts, my opinions, and being able to sense them kind of receiving that, and also being here to support me through whatever, things I am telling them. So, it's peculiar. It's very peculiar. Madagascar's not the only people who do this. I believe it's Indonesia we'll talk about in just a little bit here. They fully just keep their loved ones in the house with them after they pass. And I mean, sometimes it is for a long, long time, like incredibly long compared to what you would think. And we'll go over that. There's a couple of videos out there too when we talk about that section that I can kind of point you to, but very, very peculiar to say the least. And, so those were a couple in Africa. We're going to move from Africa just over to Asia. And Asia, a couple different ones that we're going to talk about. So a couple in Indonesia, one in Tibet, and we're going to cover a few of them. So the first one we'll talk about is in Tibet, and we're going to talk about sky burials in Tibet. Practice in Tibetan Buddhism, the body is left on mountaintops to be consumed by vultures, symbolizing the impermanence of life in the cycle of reincarnation. This method is practical in Tibet's rocky terrain and viewed as a great act of generosity to nature, a final act of generosity. They actually, I can't remember if I covered this a little bit more further down or not, but to do this, oftentimes, since they have to lug this body all the way up a mountain to get it to this feeding point for these vultures, generally this feeding point is blocked off in some way, is fenced off, is a very distinguished place that this is what we do here. We lay these bodies to rest, to be eaten. As the soul has already departed from the body is just an instrument that is no longer in use and can be recycled back into nature, is what they believe. So you can take this body, they will chop up the body into pieces so it's easier to carry. They will, bag it up. They will hike it up there. A couple different people hike up this body to this area where they set these body parts, and they will throw these body parts into this fenced in area. Or in another culture that does a very similar thing, they actually put them at the top of a tower, this tower of silence or something like that they call it, and they let these birds go to town and eat this shit down to the bone. And they really will. They'll tear it apart. I mean, if you've ever seen vultures flock together to tear apart any sort of animal, they will dig that shit right down to the bone in little time, very, very short amount of time. So they're to be consumed by vultures, and it's they put them in the rocky terrain up there, and they let the body recycle back into nature. It's kind of beautiful in one way, and it's better than polluting the earth in some fashion when, and like as I mentioned, in our culture, you get buried in a coffin underneath the dirt. That coffin's made of metal. Your body has a bunch of gases in it, and as things happen, as things get decayed years and years and years down the line, metals leach into the soils. You get chemicals from the body that leach into the soils. You're really polluting the soils when you get buried in the traditional sense here in the United States. And as much as you might not want to think about it, there's dead body juices leaking into the soil all over the country. And there's metals leaking into the soil. There's chemicals leaking into the soil. There's, embalming fluid leaking into the soil. There's just so much nastiness that is polluting the soil, and in turn polluting groundwater, polluting, drinking water, polluting so much that people get, a well that is anywhere near that could actually have remnants of some of these chemicals in it. And as gross as that is to think about, even though your water goes through, say, a filter of some sort or whatever it might be, You might be having some coffin fluids or, metal fluids or embalming fluid very, very slightly taint some of your water in some way. So try not to think about that too much, and let's move on to Indonesia. Indonesia, there's two of them I have here for this one. The first is the Dani tribe. The Dani tribe does finger amputation when someone may pass, and it's not all the time, but among the Dani people, or Dani people, it's Dani, women historically amputated a finger to express grief when a family member died. So women would be like, my husband died, my son died, my relative died, my grandmother died, whatever it might be. They said, I am going to, cut off my fucking pinky, cut off my ring finger, cut off my goddamn finger. Gonna cut off my finger just to, I don't know what the point is exactly, other than it was seen as a physical manifestation of mourning. So it's like, if you saw someone who was missing part of their finger or a whole finger or whatever it may be, you would know that they had a loved one pass and that they had mourned at some time in the past a loved one who was, had left from this world. So this practice, though, is now rare and often illegal in many of the areas in Indonesia, so you don't see it as much nowadays, but the ritual, like I said, was seen as a physical manifestation of mourning and really showed people, like, I am seriously hurt by this person passing, and I don't know how I'm going to get through it other than showing a physical display of my mourning by chopping off one of my fingers. Next, Torahan. I'm going to say Torahan. Torahan funerals, Torajan, Torahan. Funerals in Tanah Toraha can last, funerals in Tanah Toraha can last for months or years as families save up for grand ceremonies involving sacrifices of buffalo and pigs. The deceased are often kept in the homes, treated as if they're still alive until the funeral takes place. And like I had said just a little bit ago, some of these people keep their family members before the funerals, or, sometimes they don't want to have a funeral, and they keep these family members in their house for a year, for 2 years. One lady that was on this video that I had seen, she had her husband, I believe it was, who passed away, and she had him in her house for 12 years. 12 years. A dozen. Over a decade. And that blew my mind. And I mean, they show you this guy's dead body, and it's like, he's obviously looks fucking rough, but he doesn't look like he's like, flesh falling apart, maggots eating his eyes out and shit. He looks more like mummified in a lot of senses, and I think that's, they do their best to dehydrate the body and keep it in a state where, bugs can't get to it, animals can't get to it, and things of that nature. So it's in the house, and they do their best to make decomposition stay to the side as much as possible, and I believe they really try to push mummification in a lot of ways by dehydrating the body and draining all the fluids out and things of that nature. But eventually, the family holds a massive funeral involving animal sacrifices before placing the deceased in a tomb carved into a cliff, which is even cooler. I mean, you're gonna fucking get laid to final rest, and you're just gonna get slotted into the side of a fucking cliff, and boom, bang, bam, cover up that hole, and you're part of nature again. You're, part of this cliff. Your body's gonna, it's the same thing, though, as I was saying before. As much as it's nice to be like, hey, they were laid to rest here, they were buried right here. I'm guessing that they don't even use coffins when they are put into this, but, they're in a tomb, and I don't know if that tomb is, made out of cement or rocks or whatever it might be, but still, at the end of the day, once you get buried, your body will start to decompose, and during that decomposition, you will release gases and chemicals. And nice thing, I guess, in a lot of senses here is I don't believe they use, embalming fluids and things of that nature, so the chemicals are more quote-unquote natural because it's just the ones coming from your body, but still you're going to pollute the ground in some way by decomposing underground and releasing those bodily chemicals into the soils and into the waterways and into, the vegetation and plant life and everything. There's just so many factors that come with being buried that cause pollutants that people really don't consider. It's not a thing that a lot of people think about, like, hey, I had a loved one pass. I just want, a good place for them to rest and things of that nature. Many people aren't like, oh, my loved one passed, I don't want their body to be a pollutant fucking burden on the earth or whatever. So it's something to consider. It's something to think about, the fact that your body will pollute the earth at one point, and bodies constantly pollute the earth. And, I'm not even talking about just bodies of people and, of humans throughout the earth. Obviously bodies of animals, bodies of, different, species throughout the earth. And, even things such as, sea life, as, whatever it might be. There's a lot of different animals, a lot of humans, a lot of different creatures throughout the earth that die, and their bodies end up returning to the earth in some way, and allowing your body to properly be recycled back into nature is something that I find kind of interesting and kind of fascinating in a lot of ways. And just being able to, kind of return to the cycle of the world that brought you in, just kind of live with a cycle that is going to inevitably take you out. You will die, you will decompose in some sense. And I don't know how much sense it does make to be stored in a fucking weird coffin for that to happen. I don't know if that really needs to be a thing or not. I don't know if I need, my family to spend an extraordinary amount of money to put my body into, some weird chamber that it can decompose in, less rapidly than if it were just, poured underground or, anything of that nature. It's hard. It's hard to say, and everyone has their different views and rituals and, the rites, and, whether it's religious or whether it's, just a viewpoint that you've had throughout your life. Everyone has their own take on it, and that's part of the reason I really wanted to do this episode, and why it fascinated me so much is just because throughout the world, and even throughout different regions in, like, the United States, there are so many different views on what someone should do with a body once their loved one has passed. And, it's touching. It's touching in a lot of ways, and it's incredible what different cultures are willing to do for even their loved ones who have passed away, such as in Indonesia, where they will continuously care for the bodies. They will continuously take care of the bodies for years, for a decade or more afterwards. They will involve them in family events. They will bring them food. They will, allow them to have offerings that they can continuously bring into what they consider to be, the afterlife. And, if I can offer them food every single day that they can have as a meal in the afterlife, I will do it. Even if that meal doesn't look like it disappears, I know that they have received it in some way or another. It's very peculiar and very interesting and very macabre, but very awesome in a lot of ways too. And so we are going to bounce from Asia now. We took a look at a couple in Asia there, and we are going to bounce to Europe at this point. So we're going to go to Europe. In Europe, we're taking a look at Italy, France, and Greece. And we'll start with Italy. In Catholic tradition in Italy, there is the mummification of saints. Some saints' bodies are intentionally mummified or preserved as relics. Examples include Saint Bernadette, whose body remains remarkably intact. So they will, mummify some of their people or their saints or their, higher ups or people who have had a significant impact in the Catholic religion. And they will take these people and they will, mummify them and keep them as intact and, as close to what they were before they passed as they can. So, and they will hold on to them. And, I think it's one of those things where, like down the line, they're hoping that hundreds of years from now that these people can still be intact and they can be a huge mark on what, what Catholic religion was and what it offered for some of these people. So, Charans? I think it's Charans. Charans Obal? Charon apostrophe S, Charans, I think. Obal, O-B-O-L, Obal. In ancient Greece. Ancient Greeks placed a coin in the mouth or on the eyes of the deceased as a payment for Charon, the ferryman of the underworld. Without payment, it was believed the soul would not cross the river Styx. So they would put payment under the tongue or on the eyes of the deceased to pay the ferryman of the underworld to help guide them into, the afterlife or to heaven or wherever they may be exactly headed. But without that payment, they were believed that they couldn't cross the river Styx and therefore would be kind of in, would be kind of in limbo or whatever it might be, in kind of stuck in that purgatory kind of state where they can't go forward, they can't go backwards, and they're going to be kind of stuck there because they didn't have payment to allow the ferryman of the underworld to guide them to the proper spot. So they really needed, and if someone really cared about someone, they would place that coin in their mouth or, on their eyes to use as a payment for the ferryman. So from Greece, we'll go to France, and in France, there was the catacombs. It's very popular. Many people have heard about the catacombs. During plagues, overcrowded cemeteries led to the use of catacombs, underground ossuaries filled with neatly arranged bones. And they look terrifying in some way, but they also look very cool. There's very nifty. If you've ever seen, I think it's As Above, So Below. It came out in like 2008 or 2010, something of that nature, maybe a little bit after that. But they actually did some filming down there, and then there are plenty of videos and pictures and things of that nature that you can find also. But there's these little chambers, and inside these chambers there are just bones piled on top of each other and piled on top. 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet high in some areas, and then there's just skulls placed around all over the place, and it looks very fascinating, but terrifying in some senses too. I mean, it's not a place you'd want to be like hanging out at nighttime, or where you'd want to be like hanging out by yourself, anything of that nature, because even if you don't believe in that kind of shit, it's kind of pretty fucking creepy. So I don't know if I'd be super about just chilling down there and being like, oh yeah, fucking hanging with all these dead people and all their bones, and looking at this skull and talking to Johnny Skull over here, and it's peculiar. So Paris's catacombs hold the remains of more than 6 million people. 6 million. Just think about how many bones you have in your body, times that shit by 6 million, and imagine that in these catacombs underneath Paris there. Really crazy, really wild to think about. It's also very wild to think about that there's, Paris, and then there's just a whole different section of tunnels and catacombs and just a different world that lives underneath of Paris. It's not like obviously people are living, I mean, maybe there's people living down there, but people don't, live down there. And, it just seems, fascinating. It's something, if I ever make it to Paris, I would really love to see the catacombs in some sense, just for the fascinating aspect of it, just for the fascination and intrigue that I have in it. I would love to be able to see that at some point in my life. But now we've tackled Europe as well. We're going to head over to the Americas, North and South America. We'll talk starting with South America, and we'll work our way north going from there. So we are headed to South America to start. We are going to the Amazon, and we're going to talk about endo-cannibalism. Some indigenous tribes, such as the Yanomami, consume the ashes or ground bones of their loved ones mixed with food or drinks. And endo-cannibalism is eating one of your own culture or of your own tribe or of your own family instead of eating, a stranger or a random person or someone who has no relation to you. And from what I had read and from what I have heard and seen about this tradition, direct bloodline descendants don't generally eat their family members. It is the wife maybe, or the wife's family, or a father-in-law, mother-in-law, things of that nature, where they are removed from the bloodline but technically still part of the family by, say, marriage or by relations or whatever it might be, that they are brought into the family, but they are not generally part of the bloodline. It might be an aunt-in-law, something of that nature. If you have some relatives that are far enough to removed from the bloodline, they may also include them, but generally speaking, unless it's multiple generations, it's probably not going to be far enough removed. So usually it's like in-laws and things of that nature that will eat their deceased family members of some sort. So it's interesting, and I first learned about that one actually a few years back when I was doing my my associate degree, and I learned about some different tribes within the Southern American culture, and in particular, I had read about the Yanomami and the way that they consumed their own people after they had passed away, and it's definitely one way to honor the loved ones that have passed on. This practice is believed to ensure the deceased spirit lives on within the family, and I mean, definitely they are within the family. That's for fucking sure. So, not sure how I would ever feel about that, but if that is ingrained in your culture, that is something that you have seen and dealt with your entire life as you have grown up, mixing some dead person's ashes into your food or drink may be as, common for them, or as, easygoing for them as it is for someone like us to put, ketchup onto some food or something like that. It might be just as off-minded as that. You don't think about it. You just fucking put it on there and go. It might be as simple as that. And maybe people don't really think about it. They don't really consider like, hey, I am eating my fucking relative. I am eating whoever this might have been, and I am fucking like, no remorse, no fucking, whatever about that. There's no quarrels about that. And I'm sure that there's not many people who think negatively of that. It's a huge part of their culture, and it's something that they do to honor the loved ones. So I don't believe there's any more moral, conundrums that they come in with or anything of that nature. And it's just thinking about what it would be like if, like, you told someone here in North America and the United States that you, say, had your relative cremated or something of that nature, and then you told them that you ground, after getting them cremated, you mix them in with some mac and cheese or your fucking Nesquik mix or something like that, and you fucking drank them or ate them. People would probably give you a weird fucking look and have some questions for you. They may be even fucking grossed out and, maybe want to get sick or something like that. But for parts of the world, it's a common practice, and it's something that has been ingrained in their culture. So, from the Amazon, we are going to go just through Central America and up to Mexico. We are going to Mexico to talk about the Day of the Dead. This vibrant festival honors deceased loved ones by decorating altars with their favorite foods, drinks, and belongings. It's a celebration of life and death, blending indigenous and Catholic traditions. And you will see some people in the United States celebrating Day of the Dead. I would say it's a more common thing in the South or the Southwest, and I think, that's with it being closer to Mexico and having more Mexican people and people with those traditional values that they grew up with, or maybe that they were exposed to throughout their lives. And it's, a lot of them are beautiful ceremonies, and it's a party as much as it is, a mourning ceremony. And even as people are partying, they are mourning and they are celebrating their dead relatives and their dead loved ones in a way that they find comforting and reassuring, as much as they believe it will project their love, their respect, and their appreciation of their dead relative back into the relative that is probably in the afterlife, or is looking down on them from some place above or below, or wherever it might be, that they can express this love and this appreciation towards their loved one and show it to them without crying and being sad and having to wear fucking all black and look like you're the Grim Reaper's right-hand man. So instead of doing that, you can dress in some bright colors. You can have some awesome-looking, creative, artistic masks, and you can really, celebrate the life and the death of your loved one and what they had gotten to experience throughout this world and what they brought to this world, even, before they passed, and even in their passing, what they can still bring in the sense of memories and comfort and determination. Even if someone passes, sometimes you just, like, I never got to show them I could do this, I could do that. I got to this point, and I would really love to show them that I want to do this for them. Even in their passing, I want to do this for them. But from Mexico, we are going to move just over the border to the United States, and we're going to talk a little bit about cryonics. Cryonics, freezing someone after they had passed. Some people opt to have their bodies cryogenically frozen in the hope of being revived in the future when technology can cure their ailments, which I don't really understand when they say that, or when this is kind of part of it, because the majority of people who are cryogenically frozen, from what I've read, you don't keep your whole body. You get decapitated and your head is frozen like it's fucking Futurama, and you're in a little fucking chamber that's cryogenically frozen to like negative 150 degrees Celsius or some crazy shit. And boom. I mean, obviously down the line, if it comes to it, you're hoping that your mind and your brain can be restored and maybe put onto like an android body, some kind of cyborg type shit. It's very peculiar where people have gotten the idea that you can freeze your body and just years and years and years down the line just become, come back with no fucking problem. And we talked about a couple weeks ago where there was a little girl who fell into a river and her body temperature got down to like 66 degrees or something. And she was brought back from pretty much from the brink of death by recirculating and warming her blood. And she suffered very minimal psychological or mental or physical damage from that. She had a pretty normal life afterwards. She had some small difficulties with walking or with some twitches or small seizure things, but generally speaking, for someone who is that far into their body temperature going and pretty much that far into hypothermic into that hypothermic state, it's just incredible that they are able to bring her back. And some reason people think that they will be able to do that with their head or their body even after they have passed away, which is peculiar, because I understand if you were alive and you were frozen, you're just boom, your body temperature was brought down to levels that killed you, but you were alive to start. Maybe somehow your brain could be preserved and your organs could be preserved in some way where down the line, when they have more technology with it, they could rewarm your body and restart your brain's electric, kind of connections, because you need those you need your synapses going, and a lot of those are just electrical connections pretty much that fire off rapidly and repeatedly and constantly throughout the day, even when you're sleeping, even when you're resting, and you need those synapses to be going. And I don't know why anyone would think that that's gonna fucking work, but James Bedford, a psychology professor at the University of California, was the first person to be cryopreserved in 1967. So it's been 60 years almost that people have been doing this, and I think it said there's probably only about 500 plus, maybe 1,000 or so people in the United States or around the world that have been cryogenically, frozen and preserved, and it's mainly in the United States. There are a few others, I believe Europe or the UK or something like that has it also, but not a common practice really. Beyond James Bedford, who was the first person, Ted Williams, a Boston Red Sox baseball player and a guy who managed the Washington Senators, Texas Rangers from the late 60s into the early 70s. Great baseball player. He had an average batting average of like 344. He hit over 500 home runs. He was inducted to a bunch of Hall of Fames. He played for the Padres before they were actually part of the MLB. He was a great baseball player, and he had his body cryogenically frozen in 2002. But if you do read into it, he did not want his body cryogenically frozen. It was something his kids chose to do. Ted wanted his body cremated and his ashes spread somewhere beautiful. But instead, I guess due to a previous conversation that him and his kids had, they decide to cryogenically freeze his body in hopes that eventually they could all be cryogenically frozen, and if the technology was ever established, that they could all come back together as a family and be reunited in that sense. So peculiar, and it's a very strange one to me. I don't really understand why people do it, and I've never looked exactly into the science behind it to see if there's any legitimacy to it, to really see if there's a possibility that it could work somewhere down the line to revive someone who has been so far gone, so far over the end of death, so far past the end of death. Because you hear people being revived, but it's, a couple of minutes, a little while after. It's definitely not days, years, months, it's decades later. It's nothing of that nature. It's not something you really ever picture being able to happen. At that point, it's like, some terrifying 28 days later, fucking zombie, Shaun of the Dead, Day of the Dead type shit. It's very strange. And I don't know how I would feel about, even if we could, they're like, hey, we fucking brought Ted Williams back and he's alive again. It's like, what do you fucking mean? This zombie dude's alive? Like, what? Is he going to have all the same memories? Is the brain function even going to be the same as if there is enough brain function to really have this thing work? It's so peculiar. It's so oddly fascinating, oddly strange, oddly intriguing, and terrifying at the same time. I really don't know. I don't know how I'd feel about that being done to me, or having someone I love being cryogenically frozen. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. So we're going to move on from cryogenics, though, and we're going to move to the Australian region. We're going to go to Oceania. Oceania? I should have looked that one up. Oceania. Oceania? It's like Australia and the Philippines and things of that nature, right up in that area. And we're going to talk about a couple different ones, mainly the Philippines, but then I think we have one from Papua New Guinea possibly as well. And we're going to take a look at those and see what they do to, some of their loved ones, some of their rituals and their rites that they have there. So, all right, so we're headed to the Philippines. The Philippines, there are hanging coffins. In the Sagada region, coffins are hung up on cliffs to bring the deceased closer to their ancestral spirits. This practice is centuries old and showcases respect for the elderly and deceased. The hanging of coffins in Sagada, located in the northern Philippines, are an ancient burial tradition practiced by the Igorot, Igorot people, particularly in the Appalai and Konkani, I think it's Konkani tribes. This unique custom involves suspending wooden coffins on the side of cliffs in caves rather than burying them underground. And yeah, if you look at pictures of this, it's, they are coffins that are strung up or hung up, or, they have metal supports underneath of them, but they're just hanging on the side of a cliff. They're just, sitting there on the side of a cliff. And sometimes they're pretty high up. Sometimes they're 100 feet, couple hundred feet up on these cliff faces. And, it's a dangerous thing to be able to lug these coffins up there, or to lower them down and put them into place. But it's a job that people are willing to do to help, benefit their loved ones who have passed away, and who have began their journey onto another life, or onto the afterlife, or, onto the heavens, or wherever they may be going. They have started that journey, and they are looking to help them in any way possible. And if that involves climbing 100 feet up the face of a cliff to suspend their coffin on the side of this cliff, then they'll do it. They will definitely do that. This tradition dates back over 2,000 years, though it is now rarely practiced. The Igorot people that placed their dead higher up believed The Igorot people believed that placing their dead higher up brings them closer to their ancestors and spirits, helping their souls reach the afterlife more easily. Hanging coffins also protect bodies from floods, animals, and grave robbers. And, some grave robbers. I'm sure there are still plenty of people, if there was something pretty valuable or they knew this person was like buried with jewels or something, that they'd be willing to climb cliff faces to rob some of that shit out. And as we will also talk about, some of these coffins, they might not be the most sturdy after, 30 years, 40 years or something of that nature. And maybe they get some holes in them or start to rot out a little bit. The coffins are relatively small, though, most of the time because the deceased are often placed in a fetal position, symbolizing a return to the womb. As the end of one life happens, the start of another happens through reincarnation into the afterlife. So they are brought into the afterlife, and with the end of their life, they start another life and return to where they began, pretty much. In the womb, they return to that fetal position. They are brought from one life to another. So some coffins are nailed to rock faces, while others are placed on wood beams protruding from the cliffs. Most of the time, from what I've seen, they are resting on some sort of beam, wooden metal beams that are nailed into the cliff or protruded from the cliff in some way, that are secured there, that these coffins can rest on and be securely held into place with. Relatives and community members help carry the coffin up steep paths, an effort considered a sacred duty. It's a sacred duty, and people are more than willing to help others with their loved ones to help them get up these steep paths or up these cliff faces to be able to place their loved ones into the proper location for their burial or for their ceremony and respect and departure into the afterlife. But the selection of the burial site, only elders who had lived good, honorable lives were given the honor of a hanging coffin burial. So you had to be a solid dude, a solid person, a respectful and honorable member of your society and of the culture to be able to even receive one of these hanging coffin burials. And there's not a ton of them, but there are some that you can still find out there. As if you were to go, to the Philippines and actually check this out, you could actually probably find some of these hanging coffins still around in some of these places. But so over time, some coffins deteriorate, causing bones to tumble to the ground, where locals sometimes would collect them, and that's fucking weird, creepy. Trying to be respectful, maybe, though, and, keep these bones in good condition, even though they have fallen from their resting place. But it seems weird to me, being from, United States culture, the Western culture over here. It's kind of strange. Before placing the body into the coffin, family members would smear their hands with the deceased blood, believing it would bring good luck and blessings. Still, yeah, interesting. Very peculiar. I don't know what the blood of a deceased family member, how that would bring good luck and blessings, but it's something that they would do and something that they would, view as a respectful and reassuring way to help their loved one move on and help themselves embrace the death of their loved one in a positive manner. So from what I could find, the last burial was in 2010. Due to modernization and the influence of Christianity, the practice has mostly stopped, but older coffins remain visible on cliffs today, yes. So you can go there and actually check out some of these if you were ever in the Philippines or interested in going to check them out. It would be cool to see. It'd be peculiar to see, and I'm sure that you might be able to find a bone or two if you really want to be fucking creepy. Don't know if you'd be able to bring that back, though. I don't know. Getting that through customs might be a little tricky. You're like, yeah, I just got up. Didn't bring back anything about my clothes and my chargers and this bone I found. And they're like, a bone? Bone? You found a bone? It's like, yeah, it belongs to some dude. I was chatting with his sister or something, and she said it was like his forearm, I guess. So yeah, I got a dude's forearm in my bag here. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about, bro? Jeez. But yeah, so cliff burials, cliff hanging coffins on cliffs is something that was done in the Philippines, and as recent as 15 years ago, which doesn't seem so recent, but as recent as 15 years ago, there was these burials that were happening. And from there, we are going to go to Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea, it's a small little section here. The mummification of chiefs, it's very similar to earlier with the mummification of saints, but the Anga people smoked or preserved their dead chiefs' bodies, placing them in sacred sites. And by smoked, I don't mean like, yeah, they fucking rolled them up and fucking smoked them. It was like smoking a meat, kind of thing. They preserved it by dehydrating the body so much that it got, smoked and wrinkled and, dried up to such a sense that decomposition was going to be delayed comparably. It's a huge amount of delay on decomposition, and I don't know if it's forever or I'm trying to think what the word is. I can't even think of fucking words recently. I don't think it's forever that the preservation can happen, but possibly if they get them into a mummified state and they were to wrap the body somehow, they could definitely preserve it for a very, very long time. This preserved the chief's presence and served as a reminder of their leadership. So they would even keep some of these bodies around, like, hey, chief is still here, and though he is not actively saying anything, his presence is still here, his leadership still remains, he is still watching over us and the tribe in such a way that we can respect, we can show our appreciation for him, and we can understand that as much as he's gone from us, he is also with us, just the same. So, from Oceania or Oceania, however the fuck you say that word, from the Australian and Philippine region, we are going to go to the Middle East now. We're going to talk about Iran and India and some areas right around there and talk about some of their traditions. And, some of these traditions are similar to other ones we have talked about, so I will just touch on, small points about them. So in the Middle East, in Iran and India, there are the Zoroastrian sky burials, which is very similar to the Tibetan sky burials, but the Zoroastrians place bodies on a tower of silence to be consumed by scavenging birds like vultures, avoiding contamination of earth, fire, or water. As I said, being buried underground, you contaminate the earth, you contaminate the water supplies, and obviously, if you are cremated, your contamination is a little bit different, but you do pollute the air in numerous ways if your body is cremated. And this practice stems from a belief in preserving nature's purity. And like I said earlier, you kind of get recycled back into the earth, and it's just the natural cycle of life in some sense, where they are returning your body back to the earth because it is no longer being used by your soul. And then there are the Bedouin burial customs. Traditional Bedouin burials are simple and involve wrapping the body in a shroud and burying it without a coffin. So you're like, get you pretty much to decompose as quickly as possible to once again return your body to the earth in some sense, but instead of being eaten and scavenged and, used as food for birds and scavenging predators of some sort, instead of recycling your body in that sense, they said, hey, we are going to recycle your body as quickly as possible back into the earth, and your body can be used as nourishment for plants and wildlife and whatever else might be able to find you in this grave that you are in. The grave markers are often modest, reflecting humility and equality in death. So these grave markers might be, a little cross symbol or something of that nature. It might be just a piece of wood with the name on it. It might just be a stack of rocks in a particular location. They try to make it as modest as possible without interfering with kind of nature as it is. So from the Middle East, we are going to now bounce from different parts of the world. We have talked about pretty much everywhere from Africa, Asia, North and South America, Europe, the Australian region, and, the Middle East. We've talked about a lot of different areas already. We talked about a lot of different customs already. So now we are going to talk about modern and unconventional modern and unconventional practices, and I'll talk about some other burial customs possibly that I didn't already mention, also that take places in different regions from around the world. But we're going to talk about some more unconventional modern practices that have started to come to light in the last 15, 20 years or so. So let's talk about modern and unconventional practices. And when we're talking about these, there's some weird ones and some cool ones too, but some odd ones. We're going to talk about some creepier, stranger stuff too in just a minute. But first, we're going to talk about resumation, or also known as alkaline hydrolysis or aquamation, also known as water cremation. The body is dissolved in a solution, leaving only bones, which are powdered and returned to the family. This eco-friendly alternative to cremation is gaining popularity worldwide and is illegal in, I think it's 26 states in the United States, and it's not illegal in the other states. There just have been no laws passed against them particularly, and so there's no regulation exactly, and therefore not many people practicing it. I don't know what the byproduct of doing this is, and I do know that they return sterilized water back into the water cycle, which means it gets dumped back into rivers or out into, groundwater areas or dump off sites where it can soak back into the earth. So that's kind of fucking gross, but it's sterilized water that can be reused in some fashion or another, and if chemical levels are low enough, then it's not, a danger to humans or whatever, but geez, that seems fucking nasty. So there is hydrolysis or resumation, where your body can actually be cremated using an acidic or alkaline water, where it can actually turn your body into pretty much a sludge, and it will leave your bones. The bones are then powdered and returned to your family, such as they would with regular cremation, but instead of burning your body and expelling all those chemicals into the atmosphere, they are actually just, turning your muscles, your tissue into the sludge. And not sure what they do with that sludge, but I'm sure there's some gross fucking thing that they do with that sludge too. Just like dump it in the fucking sewer. Like, what do you do with the sludge of a person whose body has been just fucking turned to goop? Like, I don't understand that one. But you can get your ashes, say if you were cremated, you can get your ashes put into or changed into or created into synthetic diamonds. Companies can transform a loved one's ashes into synthetic diamonds, creating a keepsake to treasure forever. So you can really, wear your fucking relative on your finger, or wear them as an earring, or, have some sort of necklace that you get a pendant made that it has a diamond or two in it that's, like, here's my grandpa, here's my grandma. I'm going to have diamonds that, mean so much to me that if I ever lose them, I will fucking murder someone. So that would be cool, though. I mean, getting your ashes put into diamonds, I don't think it's as practical as some of the other ones, but I do think that it would be very, very interesting to have done. So, additionally, beyond that, you can do eternal reefs. You may have heard of this. This is popular in the United States in some senses. Ashes are mixed with concrete to create artificial coral reefs. These, little slabs or little bricks of concrete are then sunk in areas where they need the restoration, or they have a good marine life, but say they don't have enough to build these coral reefs, or they just want to expand certain coral reefs to some extent, and they will sink these bricks, and after a year or a couple of years, you will actually start to see coral growing, wildlife really flourishing in these areas, and I don't know if there's nutrients really, but it provides a base for these coral reefs to really start thriving. So it contributes to more marine life restoration, and it's something that we could definitely use in the world, because the world's a fucking gross place that's full of a bunch of pollutants. And I'm not saying I'm the best person in the world, because I definitely don't recycle as much as I should, and probably throw away more shit than I should, and probably don't I'm not as food conscious as I should be, and making sure that I'm not throwing away things that I shouldn't. And, I don't run a fucking a compost pile or anything. So I probably don't use my food as effectively as I could, especially, like fruits and veggies and things that you could really compost and reuse in soils and different things of that nature. I'm not saying I am grade A number one fucking human being when it comes to it, but goddamn, we are a gross fucking species that destroys this goddamn world so much. And it's really frustrating and irritating and saddening to see in a lot of different ways. But if you ever want to, you can get your ashes turned into a coral reef, an artificial coral reef that could maybe help restore some of that marine life that we are constantly fucking killing. So beyond this, you can get your ashes turned into a vinyl record, say somewhere in like the UK. I'm pretty sure there's some in the United States also that do this. There are companies that compress cremated ashes into vinyl records, allowing the deceased to quote unquote live on through music or recorded messages. So you can actually get, say if you have a message from them that they had sent you at one point, or you have some sort of speech or something that they had given, you can actually get these audio files turned into vinyl records with their ashes pressed into it. So you could play their record, hear their voice, and also know that their ashes are there with you as well. That's fucking fascinating. That's really cool to me. I'm not a huge record person or anything, but I think it's very fascinating that you can get your dead loved ones, recorded messages put onto a vinyl record that you can also have with their ashes that you can get played back at any time. If you have a record player, you can play it back and hear their voice and know that they're there with you in some sense, which is it's comforting for a lot of people, I would say, in some ways, some fashion. And it's saddening, but also comforting when you need to hear that, or you want that person to be there with you like that. So all right, and so from vinyl records and diamonds that are made with your ashes, we are now going to move from those more modern and unconventional practices to some more strange and pretty fucking gross practices. Some of these practices that I understand what they're used for, but geez, when you read about them, you're like, that's fucking nasty, yo. It's super gross. I don't understand, but I do understand. It's scientific. This is all science-based shit. It's not like they're just doing it for fun and for shits and giggles to see what would happen, but they're doing scientific research. So we are going to talk about body farms, particularly in the United States. Body farms, fun, decomposing bodies are studied in controlled outdoor environments to advance forensic science. And that's where I said, I understand it, but geez, when you read about it, it's fucking gross. Body farms are outdoor research facilities where human decomposition is studied in controlled environments. They are primarily used to advance forensic science, helping law enforcement, medical examiners, and forensic anthropologists understand how bodies break down under different conditions. So, you have these bodies that are either out in nature or maybe in like a building that is, climate controlled in some sort, and you see how these bodies break down in, say, the natural Tennessee fucking in the Tennessee summer, winter, spring, fall months, how it naturally breaks down in that state. Or maybe you have a building that is constantly 98 degrees and you see how a body breaks down in the heat like that. Or on the other end, you have a building that's, say, like very humid, but also only 40 degrees or something like that. And you see how a body breaks down in those temperatures. If they break down in a similar fashion, but just take longer, or if they actually have a different composition when they break down, maybe with the difference in temperature, different chemicals are released first that cause the body to break down in different ways. Or say, with a lower temperature, maybe only certain bugs show up. Maybe you don't get as many larvae. Maybe you don't get as many flies. Maybe you don't get as many maggots and things of that nature, just depending on exactly what the environment looks like surrounding the body that's in decomposition there. So gross, but the first and most famous body farm was established in 1981 by Dr. William Bass at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Since then, multiple body farms have been created across the U.S. and in other countries such as Australia, but I believe the U.S. was really the main one, and the most popular location for these body farms is the United States. So So we talked about just a little bit. We talked about it, but what happens, or how do they get these bodies? What happens at a body farm? What is a body farm? Donated bodies are placed in various settings, such as shallow graves, underwater, in vehicles, exposed to the elements, and wrapped in plastic, and various, environments, as I said. Researchers observe factors like how weather, insects, soil composition, and scavengers affect decomposition. And yeah, we'll talk about scavengers in just a second. Some bodies are clothed, while others are left naked to mimic real-world crime scenarios. So, if someone was raped and murdered and tossed to the side and they were left naked, decomposing in the woods for weeks on end, they can actually mimic some of those scenarios by researching and studying these bodies that are left naked out in the world to decompose on these body farms. And like, you think about it, you're like, okay, that makes sense. It has to happen somewhere, but god damn, man. Wow. I just can't imagine the sights and smells that this place fucking produces. The amount of gross, grotesque, and just nasty things that happen at these farms, I can't even imagine. So what do body farms do to help forensic science? How do they help forensic science? So studies help estimate time of death, so TOD estimations. Studies on decomposition rates help forensic science experts determine how long a body has been dead, so they can pinpoint that time of death a little bit better, a little bit closer. Don't think it'll ever be an exact science, but with technology, along with time of death estimations, and being able to factor in things like weather, like temperature, like different things such as, the environment that they're in, whether that be the forest, whether that be the desert, whether that be wherever that they're at, they can really use all of these factors to help determine a time of death more accurately and understand when exactly this person may have passed, whether it was, a crime, whether it was natural, whether it was anything of that nature. They can really understand exactly when this person passed and, how long it has been since that time. So also helps with forensic entomology. Insect activities on corpses help investigators understand the timeline of death. And yeah, so most bugs have stages of their lives, and you can tell how long a person's been dead by exactly what stage these bugs are in. So you have maggots that are like larvae, and then they change into the actual maggots and blah, blah, blah. But depending on what stage they are in, you can determine like, hey, this body's been here in these conditions. It would have to have been for, 6 days or 7 days or 5 days or whatever it might fucking be. A couple of hours, which I don't think it's that quick, but a lot of times the insects really tell the story of exactly how long this person's been dead. So they can also test the effect of burial and environment, as I've been saying. Different burial depths and conditions, such as underwater or in extreme temperatures, can influence body decay, and they can study how this influence happens with different temperatures and different settings. So different, say if you're underwater, but the water's super fucking warm, underwater the water's super cold, and, same thing if you're outside and it's 104 degrees out, or if you're outside and it's 32 degrees out. You can see all these different environments and how the body decay and body decomposition really is affected by these different factors that really touch them. So, and then advancements in crime solving. Obviously, it helps determine exactly when time of death happened, which is great, but it can also help in analyzing some murder cases, missing persons investigations, and in mass disasters. It really can help analyze and understand sometimes what happened and what caused some of these things to happen by understanding the science behind the decomposition or the decay of some of these bodies. So moving on, there are definitely some creepy and interesting facts about body farms. Some bodies bloat due to gas buildup, often leading to skin slippage, where the outer layers of skin start to peel off. If that isn't a fucking nightmarish sight to think about, picture that is put into your head. Just imagine some bloated dead body with the skin starting to peel off of the outside. I'm sure it's pussy and oozy and fucking nasty. Smells like rotten fucking ballsack garbage. Holy hell, I can't even imagine. Some corpses are intentionally left out for years to study long-term decomposition. Holy shit. Just the smells, and then we'll talk about that in just a second. But gosh, man, certain facilities allow scavengers. Certain facilities allow scavenger access, like vultures and coyotes, to analyze how animals interact with human remains. So they'll see how these. They will see how these different scavengers actually pick at the remains, whether they're willing to eat the whole thing, whether they leave certain parts of it, whether they will drag it or move it, or just eat one part of it, whatever it might be. They're trying to see how these scavengers interact with humans. So say if they found a body that was dumped in the woods, they could try to understand whether it was, attacked by a coyote, whether it was eaten by vultures, whether it was partially eaten by an animal, whether it was moved, whether it was, a lot of different aspects to it. And they're trying to analyze how these animals interact with these human remains for that reason. And yeah, this is the next part. The smell is so intense that nearby residents have sometimes complained about it. I would constantly be complaining about the smell of rotting fucking flesh from next door if I was next to a fucking body farm. So I can't say I don't understand that, because I completely understand why someone would fucking bitch and complain and have a lot of grievances with these fuckers from body farms, because the smell of rotting dead flesh is not something that's exactly fun or enjoyable or interesting to be around, and it smells worse than garbage and shit and fucking feces and piss, and God, it smells awful. I mean, if you ever smell a rotting animal in the woods or something, they smell bad. And just from what I have heard, because I've never smelled a rotting human body, but from what I've heard, they smell pretty fucking awful, if not worse than most animals do. And I don't know if that's just something to do with the chemicals that are released, or something to do with our organs or our blood or whatever it is, but goddamn, I've heard numerous times that the smell of rotting human flesh is not something that you forget. That's not something that, like, it's definitely something that can be distinguished pretty well compared to a rotting deer or a rotting raccoon or something on the side of the road. So I would be complaining all the time. No way. I would fucking move. I mean, if someone's like, yeah, you have a body farm next door, we're going to be, rotting people and looking at decomposing bodies, I'd be like, maybe I want to see it, but I'm fucking moving. I might want to stop there to check it out, but goddamn, I am leaving. So can you donate your body to a body farm? Is this intriguing to you? Is this something that you want to do? Because yes, you absolutely can. Many forensic facilities accept body donations, and donors are often required to sign consent forms before death, obviously, that you want this to happen. You're not just going to get fucking taken here and dropped off and like, yeah, just fucking do whatever you want with them. Yep. Peace out, y'all. Some programs even accept unclaimed bodies, which that makes more sense to me. If it's a body that has just been sitting around in the fucking frozen state in a morgue for quite a while, and they don't know what to do with it. The morgue's filling up, the coroner's place is filling up, and they're like, hey, we need to get rid of this body. We can't bury it. We can't have rites. We don't know who this person even is, maybe. Some of those people I definitely understand, like, hey, let's use their body for science then. Let's, at least advance our understanding of what happens to a person when they decompose, or what happens after death, by using this person who otherwise is not contributing, is not even being, loved and respected and buried by their family. If they're just sitting there and they don't have that support surrounding them in some way, even as they have passed on, maybe contributing their body to science in some way or another would be the best way to go. And so I understand that. I understand why some programs would accept unclaimed bodies and why they would use them to advance their scientific understanding of decomposition and of death. So would you want to visit a body farm? Is it too morbid for you? Is it something that fascinates you? Is it something that you would be able to do without throwing up and puking your fucking guts out? Because that would be my biggest concern, is just the smell. If they don't give you a whole like get up and face mask and all this shit, would the smell be so intense that I would end up throwing up and just wanting to leave? Or would I be fascinated enough to disregard the smell as just another terrible smell and be able to actually appreciate the scientific research that is happening at these locations? Would I be able to do that, or would I just be fucking grossed out by these dead decomposing bodies that are scattered around this body farm, because it's hard to say. It's hard to say, as I've never really been, like I said, around a decomposing human body exactly, so I don't know how I would react to that exactly. Definitely have been around countless, not really countless, but numerous dead bodies, people, relatives, friends, loved ones, even people I didn't know at some points, that have been part of the family or part of friends' families or whatever it might have been, that have passed on and have seen their bodies, done up in a coffin. They, are obviously covered in makeup. They're meant to look as alive as possible, as weird as that sounds, but trying to make them not look dead. They're in like a suit or something of that nature, some sort of dress clothes, as they are, returned to the earth in a coffin and buried in a cemetery. But I've never been around a body that is just fully in advanced states of decomposition or anything of that nature. So maybe I would want to visit one. I'm not entirely sure, but. And so some other very strange practices that have came and went and aren't really practiced so much now. In Europe, they used to bury coffins with safety bells or breathing tubes due to the fear of being buried alive. And obviously they weren't able to exactly do as much medical examination back in the day as they can now to really ensure your death. And there was times where maybe someone was in a coma or knocked out or something of that nature. Their breathing was incredibly shallow to such an extent that someone thought they had passed away, and they, put them into a coffin, and this coffin was prepped for burial within a day, and then it was buried. And there was multiple times where coffins were dug back up, people were, exhumed, and when they opened these coffins, on the inside of the coffin there was scratch marks, there was broken pieces of wood, there was blood, there was fingernail bits that were torn off the fingers. People would try to scratch their way out of these coffins as they realized they were buried underground. And as much as I appreciate their effort, you're under 6 feet of dirt. Even back in the day, you're probably under at least 4 feet or so, and no one's gonna hear you, even if you're screaming. If there's no tube, if there's no bell, no one's gonna hear you screaming. No one's gonna hear you clawing. And if you get through that coffin, you are going to be buried alive by dirt anyway. So you should, in that case, try to go to sleep, try to fall asleep. Try not to freak out too much, but you're inevitably gonna die either way, unless someone thinks that you're still alive and unburies that coffin somehow. But if they don't know you're alive down there, they think you've passed on and you've been buried alive, your chances of getting out are pretty much zero. So they would put safety bells and breathing tubes on some of these coffins in the 19th century to try and avoid being buried alive, as there was a huge fear for it. And that was in historical Europe. We were going to move to Japan. In Japan, they would do self-mummification. And you're like, how do you do that? How do you fucking self-mummify? But some Buddhist monks practiced Shokushin Butsu. They would practice Sokushin Butsu, a self-mummification process involving extreme fasting and dehydration before death. It's a self-mummification process involving extreme fasting and dehydration before death. And some of these dudes were, monks are always pretty, straight to the point, serious with shit. But some of these dudes would start years before their actual deaths. They would start fasting. They would start dehydrating themselves. And when it came up to the time where they really thought death was closing in on them, or was going to be inevitable, or they were just ready to approach death in that sense, they would completely stop drinking water and dehydrate themselves to such an extent that, their blood was incredibly thick, they were skinny, they were malnourished, they were dehydrated, they looked like shit, their skin is super wrinkly, they looked mummified before they even hit the grave, and by the time they actually got to the grave, their body was, over halfway through the mummification process already. So to finish it off was pretty easy for the rest of these Buddhist monks that were involved in that same practice there. So it's incredible what some people would do and the lengths that they are willing to go to ensure a solid death, or their practice of death extends so far into their life like that, that they would practice for years in a ritual that would bring them inevitably up to their death like that. It's just, as I've said a lot of times, it's fascinating, it's intriguing, it's peculiar, and yeah, just fascinating, very fascinating. These rituals showcase humanity's creativity, reverence, and diverse perspectives on death and the afterlife. And now we'll talk about a few lesser and uncommon death rituals throughout the world before we head into kind of the second part of this show, which is going to be the executions, and we'll finish with the afterlife towards the end before we hit, main marks and final takeaways and all that stuff. But right now we're coming to the end of the actual death rituals part before we head into executions. And executions, brutal. Brutal to say the least, some of these executions. So, but yeah, let's finish off with some lesser and uncommon death rituals throughout the world and where they're practiced. And as we've already talked about some that are more common or were more common at one point, we're going to talk about some that are uncommon or less heard of now. There have been many unusual and lesser known death rituals throughout history, ranging from eerie and mystical to outright bizarre. Here are some of the most intriguing and obscure practices from around the world. So number one, we have strangulation burial, which is the Scythians in Central Asia. The Scythians, a nomadic warrior culture, sometimes strangled wives or servants. I'm not trying to laugh about it. It's just so absurd to me that it's just ridiculous, and I don't understand it, but sometimes strangled wives or servants of high-status individuals before burying them alongside the deceased. So it's like the king dies, or, like the prince dies or some shit, and they're like, all right, so, we're sorry, but, you're gonna have to die too. His wife, his servants, we're gonna have to strangle all of you. And, yeah, you're gonna have to go and, die and, be laid to rest alongside the nobility here. So if you're not a high status individual, or you're just the wife or servant of this individual, sorry, you're gonna probably die. This ensured that they would accompany their master into the afterlife. So they're yeah, it's very strange to me, but they're going to be accompanying them into the afterlife, and even if they didn't want to go or didn't respect that part of the culture, they said, "Fuck it, we're gonna kill you." Number two would be bog bodies in ancient Europe, Celtic and Germanic tribes. Some Iron Age Celts and Germanic tribes performed ritual killings, leaving bodies in peat bogs. These bog bodies were often stabbed, strangled, and mutilated before being placed in the bog, possibly as a sacrifice to the gods. I also think that maybe they knew that gases built up within the body, and especially like the stabbing at least, and maybe they thought that stabbing the body would allow the body to sink to the bottom of the bog instead of being raised back up when the body became bloated and engorged with gases and things of that nature. So I'm thinking maybe that has to do with it, but I could also picture it being a sacrifice to the gods. But it's also like, were these respected people, or were they just random people, or what were these people? Why were you throwing their bodies into the bogs to begin with? And why would you stab, strangle, and mutilate them to sacrifice them to the gods? I don't understand that entirely, but it's peculiar, that's for sure. The low oxygen environment naturally mummifies the bodies, preserving them for thousands of years. And I do remember a case from not too long ago here, within the last 10 years, that they found a body that was incredibly old and also was incredibly well preserved in one of these bogs here. And I swear the person was like 4,000. It was like from like 4,000 years ago or something like that, and like they still had incredible details, still had like their fingernails and their teeth and all this shit. And like, I don't know, like I just remember hearing about one. I should have looked it up, but one that was like just incredibly well preserved due to the body being the body the body being placed into this bog. So number 3 would be self-mummification. I already talked about this a little bit. They would do extreme fasting for years. It's the Shokinubutsu in Japan through the 11th to the 19th centuries. And some Buddhist monks would self-mummify by performing extreme fasting, and then they would only eat nuts and bark to dehydrate their bodies and drink a toxic tea to kill the bacteria inside of them. Once they were near death or felt they were near death, they were buried in a small stone chamber with an air tube. If they were found perfectly preserved, they would be declared living Buddhists. So they would perform this self-mummification, and if they were able to do it properly and they were able to execute it perfectly, they would be found perfectly preserved in these stone chambers, and then they would be declared a living Buddha. And as they passed into the afterlife, as they were, welcomed into the afterlife, they would be declared one of these living Buddhas because they had performed their duties so well, so incredibly well. The next one would be death by fire. Good old death by fire. Viking ship burials in Scandinavia. High-ranking Vikings were cremated inside their ships, which were sometimes set on fire and pushed out to sea. A lot of them know it's like a warrior's burial, or Viking burial is commonly what it's referred to as. And this was believed to help their souls reach Valhalla, the Viking warrior afterlife. In some cases, slaves or concubines were killed to join their masters in the afterlife. So, not only were Central Asians, the Scythians, ones who killed their wives or servants to join their masters or their high status individuals in the afterlife, to be buried alongside them and join them in the afterlife. But it looks like the Vikings also practiced this at one point during their reign and during their years of being around. I can't think of the fucking word. I'm trying to think of a word and it's not coming to me. But during their years of being around, the Vikings also had the same or a similar practice where they may kill slaves or concubines to join the master into the afterlife. And the next one would be the Aghori or Aghori. I think it's Aghori. Cannibalism in India, the Hindu sect of this. The Aghori sect of Hinduism believes in embracing all aspects of life, including death. Some Aghori monks consume flesh from corpses found in the Ganges River as a form of spiritual enlightenment. That's a little weird. Not trying to, throw shade or throw dirt or throw anything at someone's religious practices, but you're eating flesh of corpse you found in a river, and I get it. The river is like I can't think of words. Spiritual, sanctioned. No, it's fucking. I know it's like a. I wish I could think of words today. I'm really having a fucking blank in my mind, but I know it's an important place in India, the Ganges River, and it's like a holy place that people believe will, cleanse them of their sins and help them move quicker into the afterlife. And I don't understand why you would eat flesh from the corpses that were found in the river, though. And I don't know how that is spiritually enlightening. I don't know how that's a form of spiritual enlightenment. I don't understand that part. And I don't understand why you would eat the flesh other than like, hey, I'm fucking hungry and there's bodies everywhere and this is like free food for me. And I know it's not that, but it seems like it could be. They believe eating the dead grants them immunity from worldly attachments. And once again, how? What does eating Hector's fucking thigh muscle do to grant you immunity from worldly attachments? It's the question. I'm curious. I really don't know how that works or how that would be. Like, at what point did they link those two things together? Like, if we eat Cush's thigh muscle over here, we're going to be detached from all these stupid worldly attachments. We're going to be, we're separated from those, and we can move much more easily into the afterlife because we don't have the attachments. since we ate Cush's leg muscle. What? Like, what do you even mean by that? I don't get it. Post-mortem photography, this isn't really like a burial ritual, but it's something that was practiced for a while in Victorian England in the 19th century. The Victorians took portraits of the dead, often posing them as if they were still alive, and it's creepy, but I do kind of understand this one, especially back then when it's not like, someone was taking photos all the time of people, and where photos were just common as, someone speaking, pretty much. It's not like you could whip out your cell phone and take 1,000 pictures in a day with no problem and still be able to take more and more. No, it was very expensive to produce photography. It took a long time to make a photo, and being able to create these portraits in some way or another for the remembrance is a special thing that families would do, because they may only have that one chance to really get a photo done. They may not be able to get portraits done before that, and maybe they took all their life savings to really put these portraits together, and they wanted it to be perfect. And since also it took a really long time to develop photography, maybe it would be easier to just make a portrait of a dead person who can't move, who can't fuck up the photo, who can't make it blurry, who can't do all this shit. They're just gonna sit there. You're gonna pose them, they're gonna fucking sit there, they're not gonna fucking move. So like, why would you spend so much money before that at the time, and why would you waste so much time before that trying to get the perfect photo when the chances of it getting messed up were like 50-50 pretty much? You never fucking know back then. And it's not like today where it's like boom, click, you could look at it right after. It's like, no, you gotta take this photo, you gotta develop this photo, you gotta get this photo put onto a Dragiograph or Dragiotype or Daguerreotype, whatever the fuck they're called, and or a little glass sheet or a metal sheet or whatever the fuck they were printing them on at the time in the 18th century or 19th century, the 1800s. I mean, there's probably a better way, and they probably could have got more done, especially if you were of nobility or something. They probably had more portraits done of them or paintings done of them, things of that nature. But at the time, some were propped up using hidden stands, while others had their eyes painted open to appear lifelike, which is hilarious to me, because pretty much it would be like your eyelids are shut, you can clear out your eyelashes, and just paint eyes on your eyelids. And for some reason, that's fucking hilarious to me. Just some dude with, fucking dead dude with closed eyes. And they're all like, all right, just, his eyes were brown. Just paint them brown. Just make them look good. All right, cool. It's like, I mean, I get it. That's probably, you have to be pretty talented also to do some eye painting on top of the eyeballs and make them look real still. You have to be pretty good at painting and make them look like they're not bulging out of the fucking head and stuff. Yeah, you have to be pretty solid. This practice was especially common for children, as photography was expensive, and these portraits were sometimes the only image a family had of their loved one. And that's what I was saying before, is that it was really expensive, and sometimes they really didn't have the opportunity to get portraits before that, whether it was a money thing or a time thing or just a restraint from something in their life that caused them not to be able to. But sometimes it was the only time that they looked into getting photography done for their family, was to get a photo or a portrait done, photographic portrait done of their loved one, their dead loved one. So next up would be jazz funerals. You may have heard of these before. They're from New Orleans, is where they originated in the United States here, and they are still practiced quite commonly, originating in African American and Creole culture. Jazz funerals begin with a slow, somber march through the streets, and it's usually quiet, somber music being played by this jazz band, and they will accompany the mourners, the procession, all the way to the cemetery, and then the body will be buried and committed to the earth. And after that committal, after the burial, the committal, the music will switch up, will start going more and more upbeat, and the upbeat jazz will happen, symbolizing the deceased soul moving on joyfully to the afterlife. They are moving on out of this world, they are moving into another, and it's time to fucking party. I'll tell you what, it's time to get fucking lit. Time to drink, time to party, time to have a smoke, time to do some fucking, throw some beads, show your titties, whatever it is. It's New Orleans. You got to have a good time with it. Go fucking NOLA. The procession often includes dancing and elaborate brass bands. There we go. I was going to say elaborate bass bands. And I just picture a bunch of talking fish that are singing fucking jazz music and playing trumpets and saxophone and shit like that. And it's pretty entertaining. It reminds me of the talking head fish thing that used to hang on the wall that people would have, and you press in, it fucking sings a song and goes back to looking like it's a dead fish on the wall. Some reason it reminds me of that, but I also picture that as a jazz band and like a mariachi outfit or some shit, just looking all jazzed up and nola'd up. Yeah, yeah, it's peculiar to say the least. So we go from there to green burials. Green burials, modern but ancient inspired practices. Green burials forego embalming, using biodegradable coffins or burial shrouds to allow natural decomposition. The practice is similar to ancient burials, like those of the Neolithic. There we go. Like those of the Neolithic period, and when people were buried in shallow graves and wrapped in simple cloths. And I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. So it was, let's see, where are we at here? There we go. Yeah, the Bedouin burial customs, where they wrap the body in a shroud and bury it without a coffin, with a modest grave marker reflecting humanity and equality in death. So very similar to that is this green burials, where you really don't get filled with chemicals. You don't have any metal or wood or anything really protecting your body. You just get buried in a shallow grave, and you're wrapped in cloth, and you're left to decompose as naturally as possible at that point. And still, you're going to cause some pollution to the earth, to the water, to the dirt, to the soils, and your body will naturally release gases as you die, and those gases can cause contamination. But it's no more, I would say, than an animal dying. If an animal died, they would have a very similar set of chemicals and gases that would be released by their bodies and would decompose just the same and return themselves to the earth or to nature in a cycle of being eaten and then being, crapped back out and fertilizing the earth and growing plants, and those plants are eaten. It's a whole cycle of life and cycle of nature type of thing. So from there, from green burials that we kind of talked about previously already, we are going to go to another thing we talked about previously, which is catacombs. But now, instead of talking about the Paris catacombs, we're going to talk about Italian catacombs. From the 16th to the 20th century, the Capuchin monks of Palermo mummified thousands of bodies and displayed them in underground crypts. Some of these bodies are dressed in fine clothing, while others sit in chairs propped up against the wall, eerily preserved. So you just have like a skeleton dude that's propped up in a chair. And at this point, I mean, he's pretty much stuck like that. And he's just over in the corner, being fucking weirdo and looking at you. And I don't know how I would feel about that one. At least like in the Paris catacombs, it's not just like a whole body sitting in the corner staring at you or looking real fucking kind of extra creepy, like they're about to get up and fucking haunt you. The most famous is Rosalia Lombardo. Yeah, Rosalia Lombardo, Rosalia, Rosalia, and Lombardo is Lombardo. A child whose body is so well preserved that she appears to be sleeping. That's fucking creepy. She like laying on her side, hands tucked up, on each other, and using her hands as a pillow under her cheek. And she's just sitting there sleeping. I bet she still has fucking hair and everything, because if you're well enough preserved, you can have, teeth, hair, fingernails, all of that stuff can kind of stay. I mean, don't get me wrong, your hair is going to be white as the snow, and like your nails are going to be super fucking yellow, same with your teeth and shit like that. But if they're preserved properly, you can look not alive but still appear pretty there almost, even though you're not there at all. Your soul's way departed beyond that. So Next up, we have Tibetan. Going back to Tibet. In Tibet, we talked about the sky burials before, getting fed to the vultures at the top of a mountain. But this is a little bit different. Tibetan butter sculptures of the dead. In some Buddhist communities, the deceased remains are mixed with yak butter and barley flour to create small effigies. These sculptures are placed in sacred. These sculptures are placed in sacred locations to aid the deceased's journey to enlightenment. And so they make these sculptures, place them in somewhere sacred, and it's supposed to help the deceased journey to enlightenment, to the afterlife. So, next up, we already talked about these a little bit, but coffins that scream. Due to widespread fear of being buried alive, some people were buried in safety coffins that contained bells, breathing tubes, or escape hatches. I don't know how an escape hatch would work in a coffin, but some of them were built with escape hatches of some sort. And maybe that's like, in one section where the escape hatch was, they actually put like a tunnel leading up to the ground above, possibly with like a little ladder or some shit. I really don't know. I would have to look that one up. An escape hatch for a safety coffin back in the day. But some accounts suggest people were found clawing inside their coffins, which I did mention, proving that they had been buried alive. You'd find these people with their fingernails ripped off, with bloody fingers, with scratch marks all on the inside of these coffins. And that's just terrifying. So, during the plague, Europe from the 14th century to the 17th century, it wasn't, all during that time, but during plagues during this time, bodies were piled into mass graves, often burned in pits to prevent further outbreaks. Plague doctors wore beak-shaped masks with herbs and spices in the beak, believing the smell protected them from the disease. And this is like the most common fucking thing you see all the time. You're looking up something scary, you're looking up something creepy. If you look up plague shit, you will almost always be greeted by the plague doctor mask as one of the first things with the beak shape. It looks like a bird. It looks like a bird head that you're wearing. That's some weird, creepy bird head, but it was actually a mask that doctors would wear to hopefully prevent them from getting this disease or diseases back in the day. Prevent them, not present them. Prevent them from getting the plague that they were, working on, or the plague that had killed so many people that they were piling into these mass graves. And then finally, we have space burials. It's a modern day but uncommon practice. Some people, including Gene Roddenberry, which is the Star Trek creator, have had their ashes sent into outer space. There are companies like Celestis, which offer services to launch remains into orbit or into deep space. From the looks of it, though, from everything I was reading, this is probably, and I mean it makes a lot of sense, but probably one of the most expensive ways you can get buried. In any of the different rituals and practices I have talked about, it's probably the most expensive. I believe like the base price for getting launched into orbit, which is like as low as possible as they can get you to technically be considered in space. When you're into orbit and not into deep space, it's like $30,000 or some shit like that. And I'd have to imagine getting launched into deep space is probably like 50, 100 grand or more, depending on exactly how far out you want those ashes to go. It's just an absurd amount, and the only people who are ever going to be able to afford something like that are those who, are fairly wealthy when they die. I mean, if you just have 100 grand to toss away at someone's fucking funeral burial, that's impressive. That's good for you if you just got that fucking laying around, or you can get that financed or whatever it is. So, not a common one, but definitely an interesting one. Would you want to have your ashes sent to outer space? Are you that interested in space? Would you want to, have the possibility of your eternal afterlife being spent in outer space, or, just your being being placed into outer space for the rest of its days? And I mean, at that point, at least like, hey, if you get cremated and your ashes get spread somewhere on Earth, say if you went to like a national park, you went to Hawaii, you went to somewhere just beautiful, had your ashes spread. Yes, there's no permanent marker exactly where your body is, but at least your family or your friends or whoever could go and visit the place that your ashes were spread and still kind of get that like feel your presence type of thing. Like, hey, I felt them there. I know that they were there because this is where we had their ceremony. We spread their ashes. It was this whole big thing. I know they're there. Like, you're in fucking outer space. What am I going to do? Hop on fucking NASA's next thing and hop up to, or SpaceX's next thing and fucking hop up onto the fucking, into orbit or go up to the International Space Station? Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm not going to be able to visit your fucking ashes in space. That's some horse shit. So at least, like, I don't know, if you're ever thinking about it, maybe keep a little bit of your ashes to the side or have some of them spread somewhere and then also sent to space. And then it's like, you can at least have that reassurance for some other people that, like, hey, I can still visit them, quote unquote, in some sense of the way, at least. So many of these death rituals reflect deep spiritual beliefs, societal values, and practical considerations. While some may seem strange, definitely strange, or even disturbing in some ways, like, eating flesh of dead bodies out of the Ganges River, they highlight the diverse ways humans have sought to honor the dead and cope with morality. But which of these rituals fascinates or horrifies you the most? Which one caught your attention the most? Also, speaking of, with the Ganges River thing, there is a city in India near the Ganges River, and it starts with a V. I cannot think of the actual name of it right off the top of my head, but in this city, I watched a video on this, and they showed some of this, but they 24 hours a day have fires burning, or funeral pyres burning. I don't know what the word pyre, where it came from. I don't know. I mean, obviously it was around before the word fire, but like, they had a funeral pyre burning, and they would constantly have this burning. They constantly have it burning 24 hours a day and all day. They burn it right by the river, and they constantly pile bodies onto these funeral pyres. And it's supposed to be, a very sacred, a very meaningful and very, religious, spiritual place to pass and to be cremated. And many people come from outside the city, from outside the country even, to this location because it is such a sacred and holy land that they want to be cremated and buried here. And, some of them during their dying days will come here and try to raise money to be able to pay for their cremation and burial here. But bodies are loaded onto these funeral pyres, and then they are burned down to ashes, or as far as they can go, and then they're just swept off the side right into the fucking river. So you just have tons of ashes. Sometimes people don't get burned all the way, and I'm guessing that's where some of these dudes find these this flesh and these people that are floating in the river that they can consume flesh off of. And because some of these bodies don't get burned all the way, you'll have a leg, you'll have an arm, you'll have a piece of a body, some of a torso or something that doesn't get burned all the way, but gets charred and just gets thrown into the river after that. It's just at the bottom of the pile, or, top, whatever. It just didn't get burned all the way, and they, every once in a while, just sweep everything that's there off into the river and get the fucking pyre going again. So, kind of terrifying, kind of odd for people from, the United States or Western cultures over here, but, it is a very common practice there, and it's something that is very sacred and spiritualistic, and it's something that they embrace wholly and wholeheartedly, and is as common over there as it is to have someone put into a coffin and buried underground over here. So I'm not knocking it, but it's not something that I understand because I've never had those spiritual beliefs before and never understood those values entirely because I never grew up with it. I never grew up knowing someone who practiced something like that. It's never been a part of my life or the way that I've practiced things or the way my family's practiced, that kind of thing. If you're not exposed to it, it's uncommon to you, and it's can be strange or odd or weird in ways when you're not used to some of these practices or some of these beliefs that come around or that you hear about over time. But yeah, just tell me which of these rituals was the most fascinating for you or the most horrifying for you? Would you want any of these rituals be the way that you're buried, or the way that you're treated during your dying days? Would you ever want to, self mummify? Would you ever want to be sent to space? Would you ever want to be eaten by your fellow family members, or maybe chopped up and put at the top of a mountain for vultures to eat you? Would you want to be returned to the earth in a green burial where you're naturally decomposed with no chemicals? Would you want, I mean, there's so many different things here, and it's hard to say. It's hard to say exactly what I would want, even, but there's just so much to it, and so many different aspects that could happen, and so many different things. That would you want to be buried in a fantasy coffin in Ghana? Would you want to have a huge coffin that looks like, a Walkman, or like, a fish, or some tiger, or your favorite food, or where you worked, or whatever it might be? There's so many different beliefs and values and considerations to take during your dying days and leading up to the end of your life, because inevitably, like I had said at the beginning, we are all going to die. We are all going to perish. We're all going to pass one day. So that's just something you got to think about. It's really something you gotta tackle and look forward to. And with the way things are going right now, I don't know. I don't know what I would want. I don't know. I've not sure if I would want any of those different practices, those different rituals to be performed on my body when I pass. Yeah, I think I just want to be like cremated or something of that nature. You can take my body, take my ashes, make me into, take my body, make me into some ashes, and take those ashes and spread them somewhere beautiful, and take me somewhere maybe I'd never been in my life, because I don't think I'm going to be able to get everywhere that I want to get to. I mean, I know hopefully there's still a lot of years ahead of me, and hopefully I'm able to make it through most of the world and most of the countries that I want to get to. And we'll have to see at that end. But take my body and turn me into some ashes, spread my ashes somewhere beautiful, and call it good. I'm not saying I'm a huge believer in the afterlife. I like the idea of the afterlife. I like the idea of, say, our loved ones still being there and watching over us, and their spirits being able to come around and to guide us, to reassure us in some way. Don't really know if I believe in that 100% one way or another. I would say I believe in it more than most religious things. I would say I believe in it more than heaven or hell. I was baptized as a Methodist growing up, and I was never big into church. I was never big into religion. It's too, I know it's not culty, and I don't want to say that, but it's too culty almost in a way for me. And, religious ceremonies at churches were always too preachy, and, too preachy and very, not my vibe. Definitely not my vibe at all. But, love people who are religious, know a lot of good people who are religious, know a lot of terrible people who are religious. So it's one way or another. You never have, this is the right way to go, this is the right thing to do, this is the right thing to believe. There's no certainty in any of it. And if it, helps you in your everyday life, if it helps reassure you in some way that life is good, that, life is going to be good even in death, I think it's a good thing for you then. I think that if it helps you in one way or another, it helps bring positivity to your life, or helps you bring positivity into other people's lives, I think that it's a solid thing to be able to appreciate and believe in then. And, just because I don't necessarily believe in it, and I don't necessarily practice it, doesn't mean that I am, knocking it in any way, because I do think that there is a lot of good and beneficial aspects to religion in a lot of different ways for countless millions of people that do believe in a lot of it, that do practice a lot of it, that do accept a lot of the different beliefs in their life. So I'm not huge into it, and I'm not huge into, say, like do a Christian burial and show my body to everyone and like this whole thing. Like, cremate me. If you want to have a service, make it more of a fucking party, because I don't want a bunch of people crying and being stupid ass fucking nonsense. And I get you have to have that time of mourning, and it's healthy for you to have that time of mourning, to be able to cry, to be able to have these memories come up, or to be able to look at pictures or talk with people. But I wouldn't want a ceremony like that. I wouldn't want people fucking crying over my body and looking at my dead corpse as I lay in a fucking coffin. It just doesn't sound nice. It doesn't sound enjoyable. And after doing that my entire life and having, ceremonies my entire life where you've always went to funerals and looked at the body, unless, the body was too fucked up in some way. But I don't think I've ever been to a funeral where it was closed casket like that. I believe the majority of them that I've been to, even, younger people that have had some terrible thing happen, whether it was, I can't remember, oh gosh, whether it's been a suicide or a car crash or whatever it was, I think that even the majority of the younger people, whether it was friends, whether it was, someone we had worked with, whether it was someone just in my high school class, any of those people who had passed away, I think that even majority of those were open funeral in some way or another. I just can't remember entirely if they were, because there's two of them in particular I'm thinking of, and I believe one of them was. I just can't remember the other one if it was. And with that, so with that, with a little bit of talk about what I believe in, with that, and with the length that this episode has already been going, we're going to have to make this into a two-parter. I didn't expect that, and this is going to be my first one I've ever done. But we've talked a lot about different death rituals this week. Next week, we are going to be tackling executions, and we're going to be tackling some afterlife beliefs from different cultures also. We're going to be tackling those, and we're really going to dive into what comes with executions, what comes with the afterlife, and we'll really wrap things up next week. We are going to do one or two small main marks right now, and then after that we'll bounce into a short takeaways before we get to the end of this episode. So let's get going and let's dive into the main marks. All right, so number one, we are going to talk about, again with our main marks, fantasy coffins. In Ghana, the deceased are buried in elaborate, custom-designed coffins that reflect their personalities, professions, or passions. Coffins may resemble animals, cars, or even Coca-Cola bottles, along with numerous other things. Number two, the Towers of Silence, or Dakamas, are where Zoroastrians traditionally place the bodies of the dead. At the top of these towers, bodies are laid according to gender and age. Children are placed in the innermost ring, women in the middle ring, and men in the outermost ring, and then vultures and other scavengers often wait on the tower's walls, ready to consume the bodies, expediting the decomposition process. Death, in the view of the Zoroastrians, I should have looked that one up. Zoroastrians should not linger. So, your soul's departed, and after your soul has departed, your body is just a vessel that is no longer being used. That vessel should be returned to nature as quickly as possible, and they do that through sacrifice to scavenger animals that can, use your body, your meat, to replenish themselves, to return you to the earth, and to, help return you to nature in one way or another. Number three, if wanted, companies can transform a loved one's ashes into synthetic diamonds, creating a keepsake to treasure forever. And that's some fucking bling bling, motherfucker. Look at this guy. I got Johnny Two Toes on my fucking wrist because I got him made into diamonds after his motherfucking ass burned. Yeah, so I got him cremated after he died, and I put his bitch ass into some diamonds. Like I said, bling bling, motherfucker. Hell yeah. Would you want to be made into diamonds? Would you want someone to make you into like a diamond necklace or something? You could be the big ass fucking right on the pendant of the diamond. You could be the main part of it. Or maybe like you get the ashes put into a bunch of smaller diamonds that are made into a whole bracelet or something like that. I mean, would you want that done? Do you think that sounds cool? Like, I don't know. Number four, in the 18th and 19th centuries, due to widespread fear of being buried alive, some people were buried in safety coffins that contained bells, breathing tubes, or escape hatches. Some accounts suggest people were found clawing inside the coffins, proving that they had been buried alive. And that is one of the most terrifying things I could ever fucking think of. Being buried alive is like, next to being on, open water where I can't see anything, or being bridges over the water that are kind of like weird fears I have, where it's like I'm terrified of being in a fucking car and the bridge collapsing, or, being thrown into the water when I'm out in the middle of the fucking ocean on a boat or something. These weird fears that I have. Being buried alive is probably another pretty close weird fear. It's not, I don't really consider it as much, and it's not something that, I really have to think about as often as, like, say, going on a bridge over water, because very commonly I go on, whether it's shorter bridges or longer bridges, I commonly go on bridges over water, and that's just, it's one of my things where I'm fucking terrified that these bridges are going to collapse. I mean, it doesn't stop me from going over these bridges, like the Mackinac Bridge that comes from the Lower Peninsula to the Upper Peninsula, or vice versa. It's not going to stop me from going over those bridges, but goddamn, is it fucking scary sometimes to me. Especially, like, you're going over the Mackinac Bridge, and sections of it are this, like, metal grate. And this metal grate, it makes it sound really weird, like as you're going over it. Like, it sounds weird with your tires. And then this grate it's great. So if you look out and you look down, you can just see through the fucking bridge to the fucking water that's 100 feet below. Like, what the fuck is that? What if this grate falls out? What the hell's gonna happen then? I'm gonna fucking die. And yeah, I mean, obviously there's been some bridge collapses and shit, like, the Baltimore Bridge collapse, and quite a long time ago, I think it was 2008, there was one in Minnesota, possibly, where a bridge collapsed into a river that was a freeway collapse. And, things like that are just terrifying to me. Just absolutely terrifying. And it's like one of those things, like, even if you survive that, like, the initial fall, then you're out in the water and you have to somehow dodge cars and other debris and other shit that might fall, and try to get away from all that and still not get pulled down by it's just terrifying. And gosh, with that, we're gonna tell me, what's your biggest fear? What's your most weird, irrational, semi-rational fear that you have? What comes to your mind when I say that? What's your weirdest fear about dying? What's that weird way you think that you could die that you fear? Not daily maybe, but you think about every once in a while. Because I would say being in a bridge that collapses over water is probably one of my big ones. But with that, with our weird talk there, with weird talks about death today, with our main marks now wrapped up. We did 4 today. We're going to do another 4 next week. We'll have 8 total for this 2-part episode. We are going to bounce from the main marks into our final takeaways. All right, so from the eerie silence of ancient tombs to the violence of something such as having your body chopped up and fed to a bunch of vultures, to different practices such as cremation or resummation, where your body is broken down and returned to the family as ashes. There are numerous, countless, endless ways that people have practiced death and showed appreciation to their dying and dead loved ones throughout history. And there are numerous rituals, there are numerous rites that people have performed throughout history to show that love and show that affection, or, just help their family, their loved ones, their nobility, whatever it might be, pass into the afterlife, pass to the next world, or, if their soul is headed to heaven or hell, once they pass, once their body is dead and their soul has departed, sometimes they just do what they can to show appreciation to the vessel that carried that soul by returning it back into nature, such as they do with sky burials, such as they do with funeral pyres in India. Just numerous ways that they are able to show that appreciation, that love, that respect that they have for their dead, dying loved ones. Or we could even bounce to like the Philippines, where they show love by keeping the body with them in their home, by dressing the body, by feeding the body, bringing them meals, by talking with the body, that family member, about things that are still going on within their family and keeping them up to date as much as possible for, years. Sometimes this lasts a year or 2 years or even 10 plus years as they are waiting to have a funeral for this person, as they're waiting to gather the funds or waiting for the right time to have this funeral ceremony. There are so many different ways that have been shown throughout history for these death rituals, these death practices, and beliefs in different things such as the afterlife, such as, Jesus or God or whatever it may be, these different beliefs that brought people to perform these different rituals and practices throughout history. It's incredibly intriguing, incredibly fascinating with the amount of different aspects that have to be considered in a lot of these different cultures throughout the world. So through rituals meant to guide to death, or, beliefs that brought both comfort and terror to some people, we end up at the end of our days, inevitably everyone will pass, everyone will die, and there will be something done with your body. So what that is, can be up to you, can be up to your religion, can just be left up to your family. It's hard to say. In the end, death remains the ultimate mystery. We don't understand exactly what happens after we die. Even those that have, NDEs, near-death experiences, which we will talk about more next week also, even the people that have those, it's hard to say that they know what happens when we die. Yes, they might see something. Yes, they might, have someone talk to them. They might have this or that. But is that exactly what happens? Is it something that is, unique to them or unique to their situation? Or maybe it's only because they were able to go and come back that happened. Maybe when you go and you don't come back, it's lights out. Maybe you don't have anything happen. Perhaps that's why we cling so tightly to the stories of spirits, legends of those who have, had near-death experiences, and those ancient traditions that are meant to ease our passage into the unknown. Maybe that's why some of those are still so heavy within religion, heavy within some people's beliefs, and why they're still practiced, throughout the world, throughout different societies and cultures, why these are practiced so heavily in some areas, why they keep funeral pyres burning in India 24/7. Those beliefs that are ingrained in us, not just through our family, but through our, religion, through history, even through just practices that are so common that it's just what we think is meant to happen. Like I've always seen someone be put into a coffin and displayed and then, committed to the ground. It's pretty much 9.9 out of 10 people who have passed is what has happened in my life. There's been only one person I can even think of off the top of my head that was cremated after their death. And beyond that, it's always been the common here, put the body into a casket and, take that casket and then display it for the viewing and the funeral, and then we're going to commit that body to the earth, and they are now in their final resting place. And it's just interesting that there are so many different beliefs and rituals throughout the world, and it's awesome. Like I said, it's awesome and fascinating to be able to talk about all of these, and extraordinary in a lot of different ways. So as we close the book on tonight's journey, at least this part of it, ask yourself, what do you believe happens after we die? Is there peace, judgment, or something entirely different waiting beyond the veil? Whatever the answer, one thing is definitely clear. Death is not just an end, but a story. It's your story. It's your life story through your death. One that has shaped humanity for thousands of years and will continue to do so long after we're gone. So you have your legacy. It's that story that you created while you were alive will follow you into death. And it's what people will, remember as you are put into your final resting place of some sort, whether that is your ashes being spread after being cremated or recimated, or whether that's being traditionally buried in a casket into the ground, or whether that's, being chopped up and put at the top of a mountain for vultures to eat you. You have that story that will follow you after your death, long after your death, hopefully long after your death. People will remember you and have those memories of you, and will be able to recall countless things that you did throughout your life that affected them or affected other people in a positive manner. And I think that's what we're all looking for, is to create a legacy that touches a lot of people, that is able to be seen after our death, that is able to be appreciated after our death. And it's something that it's hard to form, especially nowadays. It's getting harder and harder to create some sort of those legacies, at least if you're trying to do something really big or really touch a lot of different aspects of humanity, or you're trying to affect a lot of different people. It can be very hard nowadays, especially since things usually cost money. Things usually cost a lot of money. And with the way the economy's been going, it's not really been helpful in any way to save up money or to be able to put your money towards things such as, creating a legacy or donations or charities or whatever it may be that you're looking to be a part of. And, just go out there and try to create a legacy, try to help someone today, try to affect someone's life in such a way that they will remember it even after you passed, years and years from now. Just try to be good. Try to be a great person. Try to go out there and create a wonderful legacy that can be remembered in such a positive light, no matter what way you choose to be buried, no matter what death rituals you may perform. Try to create such a positive light of yourself and such a positive view of yourself, that image that you have once you pass. Just try to create something that is spectacular, extraordinary, and outstanding in many ways. And next week, instead of heading to Lagos, Nigeria, as we were going to, we will be delaying that for a week. We are going to be coming back, and as I said, talking about executions and the afterlife next week as part 2 of this episode. And I appreciate you being here. I want to say thank you so much for checking out the show, for listening to the episode. If you're a return listener or a first-time listener, it really means so much to me. I can't even explain it. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And if you haven't had the chance, please rate and review the show. Just take a couple of seconds, give it a rating, give it a review. If you love the show, please give it 5 stars. If you hate the show, please just go over and give it 5 stars and give me a review as to why you hate it. I'd love that so much. I really I would love some feedback. I want some feedback, whether it's good or bad. I really would appreciate some solid feedback that can help me develop the show and create a better show at the end of the day. So I appreciate that. I appreciate all of you. Beyond that, please go follow the Instagram page at Beneath the Shadows Podcast on Instagram. If you haven't, or if you'd like to support the show, there is a Patreon page where episodes are released. I will be doing some bonus episodes that are released on here. I want to get into Patreon exclusive content down the line once I get more support on it. But for now, if you want to support the show, please maybe sign up for Patreon. It's only $3 every month, and you get, all the episodes. If I ever do get sponsors, they will be sponsor-free episodes on there, no ads, nothing of that nature. And like I said, I would like to do Patreon exclusive content down the line if I can dedicate more time or have more support leading into that, to be able to really dedicate my time to creating that Patreon exclusive content. So thank you for checking those out. If you ever want to hit me up also, Beneath the Shadows Podcast at gmail.com. Topic suggestions, just to chat, whether it's just a rating or review about the show that you don't want to post publicly. If you want to send me anything, whatever it may be, please send me an email or two, or hit me up on Instagram, whatever it may be. Thank you, though, for joining me tonight on Beneath the Shadows. And until next time, until next week for part 2 of death, dying, of these rituals, these executions, this afterlife. Until next week, until next time, stay curious and stay illuminated in life and light. Peace out, y'all.
Wow, wow, wow.